The global water crisis, a growing emergency. Can the world survive without water? Exploring the global impact of water scarcity and climate migration. Section 1. The global water crisis, a growing emergency. Water scarcity is no longer a distant threat confined to developing nations. It has become an immediate and pressing issue in developed countries like the United States and Germany. Communities are grappling with diminishing access to clean and sufficient water, driven by climate change, mismanagement, and overexploitation of resources. This section examines the current state of water scarcity in California and Germany, highlighting it as both a humanitarian and environmental crisis. 1.1 The California drought, a crisis at home. California, renowned for its natural beauty and agricultural productivity, is facing unprecedented drought conditions. Avila Beach, a scenic coastal town, exemplifies the deceptive calm of a region on the brink of a water crisis. Pete Kelly from the local community services district observes, "It's a beautiful spot, for sure. It's also very dry now compared to what it usually is, but not this year, it's semi-desert." DW Documentary, 2021. Behind the picturesque facade lies a growing fear that California may run out of water. In Mendocino, a town perched along the northern coastline, residents now rely heavily on trucked-in water due to the depletion of local sources. Starting this career in the middle of one of the worst droughts in the last 100 years has presented quite a few challenges, says a former firefighter turned water manager. DW Documentary, 2021. The crisis reached a tipping point in July 2021, when Fort Bragg, a neighboring town that supplied water to Mendocino, shut off its reserves. That's when panic set in, reported local officials, highlighting the cascading effects of regional interdependence. DW Documentary, 2021. The declaration of a drought emergency by California's governor further underscored the scale of the disaster. Restaurant owners, facing operational paralysis, began locking public restrooms due to water shortages, labeling the situation a health and safety crisis. DW Documentary, 2021. The human cost became increasingly evident. It's a human emergency. You know, you can't have people defecating on the street, said one local resident. DW Documentary, 2021. Massimo Melani, an Italian expatriate and restaurant owner, explains how his business survives on rationed water supplied by the county. "We give to the customers one little bottle," he says, adding that it is difficult to manage expectations in a first world country where water scarcity was once unthinkable. DW Documentary, 2021. Former Governor Pat Brown once stated, "Without water, California is without a future," quote catalog, ND. This sentiment echoes the current predicament, as communities confront the stark reality of water scarcity. Environmental activist Aaron Brockovic emphasizes the gravity of the situation. "The water system in this country is overwhelmed, and we aren't putting enough resources towards this essential resource. We simply can't continue to survive with toxic drinking water. What should I read next?" ND. 1.2 Europe's emerging water deficit, Germany's struggle. The water crisis is not confined to arid climates. In Germany, a country traditionally seen as water-rich, recurring droughts and heat waves have begun to expose vulnerabilities in water infrastructure. In Lausitz, for example, the local water authority issued an alarming notice. Due to high levels of consumption, the local water supply levels remain critical. The fire department will soon be distributing a final supply of service water in your area. DW Documentary, 2021. Experts like Simon Price from the Nuremberg Water Authority and hydrologist Klaus Arzet have been monitoring groundwater levels at key measuring sites across Bavaria. Their findings are sobering. Since 2012, the groundwater level has dropped by 13 meters, Price notes. DW Documentary, 2021. The downward trend shows no sign of reversal. Groundwater levels are dropping, and are taking longer to be replenished if they're recovering at all. DW Documentary, 2021. The implications are severe for towns like Tyaschnitz, where local wells have supplied water for over a century. With declining yields, communities have become dependent on remote water systems. Christian Muller, from the local utilities maintenance department, states, "Climate change means our wells no longer yield what we need. So now we're entirely dependent on a remote water supply." DW Documentary, 2021. Michael Bilal, representing the Regional Environmental Agency, adds, "In 2020, we recorded record lows for groundwater levels, and there's just less water being discharged now." DW Documentary, 2021. For many residents, the transformation is deeply personal. It's scary. And it makes you really reevaluate your life where you live. It's one thing not to have Wi-Fi. It's a whole other thing if you've got no water to drink. DW Documentary, 2021. The German Federal Minister for the Environment, Svenja Schulze, acknowledges the emerging challenges. The natural water supply is out of balance due to climate change. Many natural water reservoirs, such as landscapes and soils or the shore areas of lakes and river floodplains, no longer fulfill their function properly. Diplomatisches Magazin, ND. This recognition underscores the need for a comprehensive national water strategy to address the multifaceted issues arising from water scarcity. Section 2, Case Studies of Water Scarcity. California and Germany. California, Drought and the Limits of Resilience. California, one of the world's most agriculturally productive and economically significant regions, has increasingly become a cautionary tale in the global water crisis. The state has experienced prolonged droughts, leading to critical shortages even in areas once considered water secure. As Pete Kelly from Avila Beach noted, "It's a beautiful spot for sure. But it's very dry now compared to what it usually is. It's semi-desert." DW Documentary, 2022. This transformation, from lush coastlines to arid landscapes, illustrates how even temperate regions are vulnerable to climate-induced changes in precipitation patterns. In Mendocino, Northern California, the situation is equally dire. The town, perched on ocean cliffs and once considered safe from water stress, now relies on trucked-in water due to depleted local supplies. One resident emphasized the severity, "We've been depending on trucked water since at least January, and all of a sudden there is no more water available." DW Documentary, 2022. The panic that followed, where restaurants had to close restrooms or shut down entirely, underscores how deeply water availability is intertwined with public health, local economies, and basic human dignity. Water stress in California has pushed municipalities to implement extreme rationing. Massimo Melani, a restaurant owner originally from Italy, remarked, "We give the customers one little bottle. Obviously, if they ask for more water, we give more water. But it never used to be like this." DW Documentary, 2022. As Paul Wostel, 2017, points out, when water governance systems are not adaptive, crises can emerge even in technologically advanced societies. The situation has led experts to re-evaluate water policy across the American West. Famiglietti, 2014, a NASA hydrologist, warned that the region is not prepared for a prolonged drought of the type we're beginning to experience. These case studies signal that even advanced infrastructure cannot compensate for the basic ecological reality of water scarcity. Germany, a European water crisis emerges. While countries like the United States have been grappling with water stress for decades, water shortages in Germany are a more recent phenomenon. However, the severity is increasing at a dramatic pace. In Lauenau, Lower Saxony, repeated summer droughts have led local authorities to issue emergency warnings. Due to high levels of consumption, the local water supply remains critical. Drinking water could occasionally be interrupted. DW Documentary, 2022. The local fire department has had to distribute service water to affected residents, a striking image in a country historically considered water-rich. In Bavaria, the town of Tieschnitz provides a stark example of groundwater depletion. Since 2012, groundwater levels in some locations have dropped by over 13 meters. We've been measuring this site since 2012, and levels are taking longer to be replenished, if they're recovering at all, noted Simon Price of the Nuremberg Water Authority, DW Documentary, 2022. Christian Muller, a local water official, emphasized the long-term impact of climate change. The municipal wells and springs are yielding a dwindling supply of water. Now we're entirely dependent on a remote water supply. This shift has forced communities to turn to long-distance pipelines and dam-fed reservoirs such as the Mothos system, which now supplies 1/3 of Germany's drinking water. DW Documentary, 2022. The transition is not without ecological and financial cost. Dams, once opposed for environmental reasons, are now essential. Marcus Raw, director of a regional water association, explained, without a long-distance supply, large parts of Bavaria would already be dry. Grambo, 2020, a leading water expert in Germany, highlights that the country's challenges are symptomatic of a broader shift. 30 years ago, no one believed that today Northern Europe could be facing a water shortage. But now we're starting to feel the full impact of climate change. This marks a paradigm shift in how Europeans view water security, no longer as a given but as a resource under siege. Lessons and broader implications. California and Germany, despite their vast geographic and climatic differences, are confronting similar dilemmas. Both case studies illustrate the need for systemic adaptation from local governance to national infrastructure. As Gleick, 2018, asserts, the global water crisis is not just about scarcity, it is also a crisis of mismanagement. Moreover, both regions underscore the intimate connection between climate change and water availability. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, 2022, warming temperatures will intensify the hydrological cycle, making wet areas wetter and dry areas drier, a trend already visible in places like California and northern Bavaria. Section 3, Global Monitoring, Technological Interventions, and Future Outlook. Global monitoring through satellite technology. While the local experiences of California and Germany illustrate the human and infrastructural toll of water scarcity, the global scale of the crisis is increasingly being monitored using cutting-edge technology. At the forefront of this effort is the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment, GRACE, a joint satellite mission by NASA and Germany's space agency DLR. Hydrologist Jay Famiglietti, executive director of the Global Institute for Water Security, explained how the GRACE satellites operate. They work like a scale in the sky. When a region is losing water, it absorbs slightly less of a gravitational tug and the satellites fly a little higher in their orbits. DW Documentary, 2022. These subtle movements, when tracked over time, allow scientists to identify global water trends that would otherwise remain invisible. The implications are profound. Famiglietti noted, "We've been doing this for 20 years now, and we've been recording massive water losses worldwide. The data confirm what many experts feared. Regions such as the US West Coast are drying out at an alarming rate, often before the visible effects, like droughts or empty reservoirs, become apparent." Famiglietti, 2014. This capability not only enhances early warning systems but also equips policymakers with better tools for long-term planning. Urban development and unsustainable water use. Nowhere is the disconnect between natural water availability and human consumption more stark than in rapidly growing cities like Phoenix, Arizona. Built in the heart of the Sonoran Desert, Phoenix continues to expand despite its inhospitable climate. Lush green lawns, artificial lakes, and golf courses give the illusion of abundance. However, the city relies on a 450-kilometer-long pipeline from Lake Powell, part of the Colorado River system, a reservoir that has now reached its lowest levels in recorded history. DW Documentary, 2022. At Lake Powell, the consequences are visible. Boat ramps now lead to dry land. Just a few years ago, I would be underwater right now, said a local observer standing on the cracked lake bed. The drying of this key reservoir threatens not just Phoenix but also the 40 million people across 7 U.S. states who depend on the Colorado River. U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, 2022. This mismatch between population growth, lifestyle choices, and natural resources is a major contributor to water stress. As Gleick, 2018, emphasizes, we are building cities where water simply doesn't exist, and then importing it at great environmental and economic cost. Future risks and the need for adaptive governance. The global water crisis is no longer a problem of the future, it is a present reality. Experts warn that many regions have grossly underestimated the speed and severity of water scarcity. According to Professor Martin Grambo, 30 years ago no one believed that Northern Europe could face a water shortage. But now, people are extremely worried there's worse to come. DW Documentary, 2022. This sense of unease is echoed in communities where wells that have supplied households for over a century are now drying up. In Tieschnitz, Germany, one official confessed, "We're scared that one day the water here will run out." Such admissions reveal how climate change has turned water security into an existential concern, even in regions once considered immune. The response to this crisis must be multifaceted. Satellite monitoring must be integrated with local policy frameworks. Cities must adopt sustainable growth models, and communities must be empowered to manage water resources through inclusive governance systems. As Paul Wostel, 2017, notes, adaptive governance where institutions are flexible, participatory, and learning-oriented is essential for tackling complex environmental issues like water scarcity. Moreover, long-distance water transport, while currently necessary in regions like southern Germany and Arizona, cannot be the sole solution. These systems are energy-intensive and vulnerable to disruption. Investments must also be made in water recycling, rainwater harvesting, and efficient agricultural practices. As the IPCC, 2022, highlights, adaptation strategies must be context-specific, integrated across sectors, and grounded in local knowledge. Conclusion. Water scarcity is not a distant or isolated issue, it is unfolding now across diverse geographies from coastal California to alpine Bavaria. The crisis is exacerbated by climate change, unsustainable urban planning, and governance systems that are slow to adapt. Yet through technological innovation, particularly in satellite monitoring, and through more inclusive, adaptive governance, there is still time to mitigate the worst outcomes. What is required is a fundamental rethinking of how societies value and manage their most vital resource. As Peter Gleick, 2018, aptly stated, we can solve our water problems. But we must change the way we think about water as a finite resource, as a public good, and as a shared responsibility. Section 4, The Fate of Desert Cities, Lake Powell, Las Vegas, and the Colorado River Crisis. Historical irony and the decline of Lake Powell. Lake Powell, once envisioned as a linchpin in America's plan to settle and sustain the arid western states, is now emblematic of the unsustainable path taken in water resource management. Originally constructed to protect the western U.S. from water scarcity, the reservoir now stands as a stark symbol of ecological miscalculation. In a twist of historical irony, the reservoir was named after John Wesley Powell, the explorer who famously warned against large-scale development in the arid Southwest. His recommendation was clear: this is really a non-starter, it's really, really dry. I don't think building giant reservoirs is sustainable in the long run. DW documentary, 2022. Yet, the federal government did exactly that, going big, constructing monumental dams and reservoirs, setting in motion a path now seen as increasingly untenable. Now, as visitors stand where water once lapped the shores of Lake Powell, they are met instead with dry boat ramps and towering bathtub rings on canyon walls, remnants of a water line that continues to recede. Famiglietti, 2014. One observer noted, "Last time I was here, we weren't thinking about that back then. We were just starting to think about climate change." DW documentary, 2022. The once futuristic vision has become a cautionary tale. Las Vegas, the mirage of abundance. From Lake Powell, the dwindling Colorado River flows through the Grand Canyon toward another desert metropolis, Las Vegas. Known globally for its glittering lights and extravagant water displays, from choreographed fountains to indoor canals complete with gondoliers, Las Vegas may appear to defy the laws of nature. Yet, beneath the illusion lies a stark reality. The city's water supply, drawn from Lake Mead, is at a historic low. U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, 2022. Dr. Kristen Avery, Nevada's first climate policy coordinator, stood with hydrologist Jay Famiglietti and observed the severity firsthand. "You can see where the water used to be, and we would have been hundreds of feet underwater right now if the lake was actually full," she said. "The odds of Lake Mead being full again are pretty much slim to none. This really is climate change right in your face." DW documentary, 2022. What's more troubling is the cultural inertia. Despite decades of drought, or more accurately, aridification, a permanent drying trend, many Western cities continue with unsustainable habits. "We were in Phoenix," Avery remarked, "and you know how it is there. Lots of green grass and golf courses and sprinklers shooting great arches at midday. It's all crazy stuff." DW documentary, 2022. Conservation successes and persistent challenges. To its credit, Las Vegas has taken significant strides toward water conservation. Over the past 2 decades, the city has implemented aggressive programs such as turf removal incentives, leading to a 23% reduction in Colorado River consumption since 2002 despite the addition of 800,000 new residents during that time. Southern Nevada Water Authority, 2023. According to one Las Vegas water enforcement officer, "My job is to drive around the city and find water use violations. I feel like what I do has a purpose, and I love my community." DW documentary, 2022. These local enforcement efforts, combined with community incentives and infrastructure upgrades, showcase how urban resilience can be enhanced through behavioral and structural change. Still, as Avery and others point out, these regional interventions remain a drop in the ocean when compared to the scale of the challenge. "It is crazy from a resource availability perspective," Famiglietti emphasized. "We have these megacities in the desert, and we really didn't understand water availability or climate change back then. These are really tough times ahead for our desert cities." DW documentary, 2022. A precarious future. With the Southwest locked in a decades-long megadrought now classified by many scientists as a permanent shift in climate rather than a temporary fluctuation, the viability of cities like Las Vegas, Phoenix, and others is being called into question. "Water is the lifeblood of these cities," Famiglietti warned, "and I'm really concerned about their existence." Famiglietti, 2014. In addition to declining water levels, the hidden challenge lies in the socio-political inertia and infrastructural legacy of past decisions. "Looks can be deceiving," Avery noted. "We have to make sure that everybody is conserving every drop of water possible. But that's a huge ask in a region that's grown up around abundance, not scarcity." DW documentary, 2022. The story of Lake Powell and Lake Mead is not just about 2 shrinking reservoirs. It is about the reckoning now facing a region and perhaps the world that bet on technology and engineering to solve its environmental constraints. without fully accounting for the limits of nature. Section 5, The Invisible Crisis, Groundwater Depletion and Global Consequences. While the alarming drop in surface water levels at major reservoirs like Lake Powell and Lake Mead captures widespread attention, a more insidious and largely invisible crisis is unfolding beneath the ground. Groundwater across the western United States, particularly in California, is vanishing at a rate 7 times faster than surface water, Famiglietti, 2022. This silent depletion is especially concerning given that California, a state home to 40 million people and a global leader in agriculture and technology, relies heavily on underground aquifers to meet its water demands. The gravity of the crisis is evident in the Silicon Valley, a region famous for technological innovation but increasingly vulnerable to water scarcity. Here, water-intensive industries coexist with a growing population, all drawing from a shrinking supply of both surface and groundwater. As the availability of imported water from state and federal sources diminishes, the region now faces a future dependent on aggressive conservation strategies and high-tech solutions, such as water purification systems capable of producing millions of gallons per day. Yet even these efforts may not be sufficient. Valley Water, 2023. Gary Kerman, an elected board member of Valley Water and founder of Match.com, offers a blend of levity and seriousness when addressing the crisis. His suggestion to mix online dating and water conservation to encourage shared showers may seem humorous, but it underscores a deeper truth: the need for cultural and behavioral shifts alongside technical innovation. Kerman, 2023. At the Anderson Reservoir, which supplies much of the Silicon Valley, the water level has plummeted from a capacity of 90,000 acre-feet to just 3,000 acre-feet, enough for only a fraction of the region's population. Without new water sources, residents may be reduced to receiving only health and safety water, barely enough for drinking and hygiene. This intensifying scarcity could soon provoke social unrest. As water becomes more precious, the old saying rings truer than ever: whiskey is for drinking, but water is for fighting over. Abram Lustgarten, a noted journalist and climate migration researcher, warns of an impending era of civil war for water, as populations begin moving in response to shifting climate zones. Lustgarten, 2022. For the past 6,000 years, humans have lived within stable environmental bands, but climate change is now pushing those habitable zones northward. In this new reality, massive internal and international migrations are not just possible, they are already happening. In Afghanistan, a country long plagued by drought, the water crisis has become especially dire. In Kabul, only affluent neighborhoods enjoy regular tap water, supported by groundwater pumped from poorer, outlying districts. As water availability drops by more than 50% in these areas, children are sent to fetch water or go without. Illnesses like diarrhea have become widespread due to the lack of clean water, affecting up to 60% of the population in some areas. GIZ, 2023. Residents like Ahmed Khan testify to the desperation. Water is available for only an hour every 12 to 13 days if it flows at all. As the climate crisis deepens, water scarcity is emerging as a key driver of global migration. People are already moving not only within their countries but also across borders in search of secure water access and livable environments. This invisible crisis, rooted in the depletion of groundwater and exacerbated by poor management and climate change, is quickly becoming one of the defining challenges of our time. Section 6, A Future on the Move, Climate Migration, Conflict, and the Disappearance of Water. The global water crisis is not only a matter of environmental degradation or agricultural decline, it is a powerful driver of human migration. As climate zones shift and water scarcity intensifies, people are being forced to abandon their homes in search of more livable conditions. Today, we are witnessing migrations out of North Africa and into Europe. By 2070, it is estimated that up to 3 billion people could find themselves living outside the ideal climate zone that has supported human civilization for millennia. Lustgarten, 2022. Many of these climate migrants will move northward, following the water, in what could be one of the largest human migrations in recorded history. As Peter Gleick of the Pacific Institute notes, neither border fences nor the open seas can hold back people who are desperately in need. Gleick has long studied the links between water scarcity and conflict. His organization maintains the Water Conflict Chronology, a database that tracks violence over water from ancient Mesopotamia to the modern era. Recent years have seen a sharp rise in the frequency and severity of these conflicts. Gleick, 2021. Water shortages played a significant role in the Syrian civil war, which began after a historic drought drove up food prices and displaced thousands of rural families. Jay Famiglietti, a hydrologist with the NASA Grace mission, recalls sounding the alarm years before the Syrian crisis unfolded. We started messaging on it in about 2009 before the Arab Spring, before the Syrian unrest, he explains. Despite presenting this information at high-level government institutions including the Pentagon and Congress, the response was muted. It's incredibly frustrating as a scientist, he says. It's tough to sleep at night when you look at that kind of work and understand what it means for the future. Famiglietti, 2023. Famiglietti's team has continued analyzing groundwater data, recently turning their attention to Germany. The findings are sobering. Using satellite imagery, they found that Germany is losing water at a rate of 2.4 cubic kilometers per year, a volume equivalent to Lake Constance, the Bodensee, over the past 2 decades. These results were shared for the first time with German environmental officials, who were deeply concerned. As one Bavarian water expert put it, what's particularly troublesome is that for a very long time, everything seems fine, but when changes finally become tangible, it's already far too late. The political implications are profound. As groundwater silently disappears, societies risk waiting until the crisis is irreversible. One German official remarked, "If I look at the first 5 issues facing state governments, water has to be among them. Once politics is dictated by the fight for water, then God help us." Famiglietti's journey through the western United States ends at the Salton Sea, California's largest inland lake, now a dying body of water. Once a resort destination, it has become a haunting symbol of environmental collapse. This is the realization of what happens to a community that runs out of water. There's no way to survive, Famiglietti laments. What was once unthinkable is becoming an increasingly likely future not only for California but for much of the world. This convergence of water depletion, social instability, and large-scale migration paints a clear picture. Water scarcity is not a localized or isolated issue, it is a global crisis with the power to reshape demographics, economics, and geopolitics. As Famiglietti urges, this is must-see viewing for our elected officials, for our decision-makers. They need to know that in many parts of the world, this is the trajectory that we are on. Critical analysis. The data presented in this research underscores the urgent and interconnected challenges of water scarcity, climate change, and human displacement. From California to Kabul and across sub-Saharan Africa, groundwater depletion and prolonged droughts are forcing communities to abandon long-standing ways of life. This environmental degradation, while long forecasted by scientific bodies such as NASA's Grace mission and the Pacific Institute, has repeatedly failed to provoke adequate policy responses. The root of this failure lies not in a lack of scientific knowledge, but in political inertia, short-term thinking, and fragmented governance. The irony of modern water scarcity is that it often occurs in some of the world's most advanced economies. California, for example, is both a global agricultural powerhouse and the nerve center of technological innovation, yet it faces chronic water shortages. Similarly, Germany, known for its environmental stewardship, is now experiencing a systemic water deficit. These examples debunk the myth that water crises are confined to developing nations. The issue is both global and systemic, and it will continue to intensify as climate change shifts habitable zones and disrupts rainfall patterns. Moreover, while migration due to environmental degradation has begun, current legal frameworks treat climate migrants as economic migrants, denying them the protections afforded to refugees under international law. This blind spot in global governance may prove to be one of the greatest humanitarian oversights of the 21st century. Conflicts driven by water scarcity are not inevitable, but they are becoming more likely in the absence of comprehensive water governance. As Peter Gleick points out, the historical record is full of water-related violence, and recent events from Syria to Central America confirm that the pattern continues. Water scarcity doesn't just kill crops, it undermines governments, collapses economies, and accelerates geopolitical instability. Policy recommendations. To address this global crisis, the following policy measures are recommended. Establish international legal recognition of climate migrants. Update international refugee law to recognize and protect individuals displaced by climate-related events, particularly prolonged drought and water scarcity. Enhance investment in water infrastructure. Governments must increase investments in water recycling, desalination, and groundwater recharge projects. Public-private partnerships should be incentivized, particularly in high-risk regions like California and sub-Saharan Africa. Implement climate-resilient agricultural practices, shift agricultural subsidies and incentives toward drought-resistant crops, drip irrigation systems, and regenerative agriculture to reduce water consumption in food production. Enforce regional water agreements, strengthen existing cross-border water treaties and encourage the formation of new ones, particularly in conflict-prone basins such as the Tigris-Euphrates, Nile, and Indus rivers. Satellite-based water monitoring and early warning systems. Expand international cooperation on satellite-based groundwater monitoring, making data publicly available and actionable for local governments and international agencies. Public education and awareness campaigns. Mobilize communities through educational programs that emphasize water conservation and the link between individual behavior and systemic outcomes. Mandate water stress audits. Require large corporations, particularly in water-intensive industries like technology and agriculture, to publish annual water usage audits and climate risk assessments. Conclusion. The disappearance of water resources beneath our feet is among the most critical but least visible threats facing humanity today. As the evidence from NASA, the Pacific Institute, and international fieldwork makes clear, water scarcity is no longer a distant possibility, it is a present crisis affecting millions and foreshadowing billions more to come. What's unfolding is not just an environmental emergency, but a humanitarian one. It affects food security, economic development, public health, and international peace. The era of abundance that characterized the 20th century is rapidly giving way to a century defined by limits, especially the limits of fresh, clean water. Yet hope lies in awareness, science, and collective action. This research calls on policymakers, citizens, scientists, and global institutions to act decisively. The future may bring climate-driven migration, societal upheaval, and water wars, but with the right policies, technologies, and political will, it can also bring innovation, adaptation, and resilience. The time to act is now before the taps run dry.